Welcome everybody back to Ball Street. MLS is kicking off very soon. Seattle, of course, won it last season. But who are the key players to watch out for this season? Kristan Heneage, football journalist and MLS expert, joins me right now to go through 5 players that he believes we need to keep an eye out for this season. Let's kick off with Jack Harrison. Kristan, who is this bloke?
He's an Englishman, first and foremost. He was at Man United's academy until he was about 14 with Cameron Borthwick-Jackson, and then left to attend a prep school in the States. He came from Wake Forest University and was drafted first overall last season. And he's a very talented player. I've heard rumblings that the England under-21 setup is keeping an eye on him. I've also spoke to Frank Lampard about him, and he thinks he really could go far in the game. He's got that sort of X factor. He's very good dribbler, very sort of tricky, likes to play out wide, tends to play on the right and will cut inside. And again, took to the first season of MLS fantastically, really. He overcame some injuries and finished quite strongly.
And something that other countries don't have to deal with is the draft. And he was the first overall pick last year, is that right?
He was indeed. He was actually taken by Chicago. But as most of your viewers will know, with drafts and such like this, trades involved. And Patrick Vieira felt so strongly about him, he traded quite significantly for him. And again, you now look back on that and say that was a brilliant bit of business by Patrick.
Yeah, and it's not just England who are after him, because he's been there long enough now, or he certainly will be in a couple of years. USA are obviously heavily monitoring when he's the first overall draft pick.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of sort of nuances with American citizenship, but it's not an impossible pathway. You look at someone like Dom Dwyer, who again is on course for that after marrying Sydney Leroux, the US international. And I could easily see Jack following a similar pathway. And at that point, yeah, there does become that small tug of war. I think for him, though, again, having spoken to him a little bit, I feel confident saying that England is his first choice. That's where his head's at the minute, even if his accent is dulled a little bit.
Do you think he's a player who could get to that level?
Almost definitely. I think, look, the thing is with him, he took to this league very confidently, but also with a composure that was very admirable. He didn't seem overawed. He's got a good attitude. He's a hard worker. But the most important thing, and the thing I would imagine most English fans are curious about, is his technical ability. And it's there. It's definitely there. You can see why he was at Manchester United. I don't think he's, of the elite level, but I could easily see him carving out a comfortable career in sort of the top 8, from 8 down in the Premier League or even the Championship. Because, again, he's got that ability. He wasn't at Man United just for kicks.
Yeah. Let's move on to your second pick, and he's a striker for Orlando City. Who is it, Kristan?
It's Kyle Larin, and this guy is massive. I've stood next to him, and he scares the living crap out of me. He's a big, bulking guy. Actually did his first ever football trial in basketball shoes. That was a fun story that he shared with me. He's built a bit like Didier Drogba, and in fact there was a player I spoke to at New York Red Bulls who said that is the perfect comparison, because not only can he hold the ball up, but he can also run in behind, and that's something you have to really admire about him. He's just very clinical in the box, scores lots of different types of goals, can drift out of games a little bit. There's been instances where if he's not getting the ball as much, he'll not go and seek it out as you might like. But I think Europe will be in his future most definitely. He's already trialled there. He won't say who with. But he does look set to move at some point. And
Orlando City didn't have a great season last year. They'll be expected to do a lot better this season. But the problem wasn't scoring goals. He got MLS Rookie of the Year, scored 17 goals in 27 games for a team that didn't do that well. So they'll be expecting him to kick on even more this year and get them in the playoffs. Do you think they could get in the playoffs this year?
I'm not that confident of it personally. I think Larin will score goals, of course. Funny that he took that rookie record from another graduate of UConn, Damani Rouse. So there's clearly something in the water at UConn. But I think the problem I have with Orlando is I just don't see enough quality in the central positions. I think once you get past Kakar and Larin, there's just not a huge amount there. Jonathan Spector has moved from Birmingham City. That'll be a decent upgrade for them at the back. But again, it feels like it's a year of transition for Orlando. Maybe next year I could see them getting into that playoff picture, but this year I think it might be another season of disappointment.
Yeah, first overall draft pick 2 years ago. At the age of 21, he's starting to really, really find his feet. As I said, he got all those goals last year. He's playing for Canada now, 5 goals in 19 games, and linked with Celtic as well. So if you're a Celtic fan, you might want to keep an eye on Orlando this year to see how he's getting on, because he's the kind of buy that would work really well, and probably someone that they could get for a reasonable transfer fee and develop even more so.
I wouldn't want to make the direct comparison from a goal-scoring perspective, but if you're selling Moussa Dembele, which I would imagine Celtic will do at some point because the guy's worth a massive amount, he wouldn't be the worst kind of replacement, really. He's a good physical guy. I think he'll handle Scotland or that aspect of Scottish football very well. And then also he likes to be in the penalty box. And I think that's really what Celtic seem to thrive on, when they've got that striker that just wants to be in the box all the time.
Yeah. Let's talk about some big names. And my boy, Andrea Pirlo, 37 years of age. Gerrard's gone, Lampard's gone, and it looks like it is going to be his last year playing football as well, right?
It will be, yeah. He's already taken a role with Juventus as an ambassador. It's been reported in Italy, and it's no great surprise. I think, look, last year he improved towards the end of things. But overall, I just think, this is the final few pages of his story. And there's no shame in that. I think what Patrick Vieira's tried to do during this offseason is build a team that has a bit more legs to run around him. Because if there was one thing that a lot of us were saying when he first came to the league and was having those struggles, it was the fact that if you look at Juventus, he had Vidal, he had Pogba either side of him. So he had real physical athletes flanking him, which meant he didn't have to do too much in that sense. He could quite comfortably just ping the ball around where it needed to go. Whereas I think for New York City FC, with all due respect to Frank Lampard, Frank will be the first to admit he didn't have those legs anymore. Yeah. And Federico Bravo, the other midfielder that tended to play there, just wasn't very good. They changed it at one point in the season and brought Areola in from right back to defensive midfield. And things got a little bit better. But again, Areola is, I think, 34 and has just retired himself. So again, that was the problem with New York City. There was a lot of great names in there, but there wasn't a lot of great legs.
And there are high expectations, though, aren't there, for New York? And there'll be even greater expectations with the fact that it's his last season. So is that what Patrick Vieira is doing this year? They're just trying to get those legs around him so that again, he can do what he does best, which is just pick out those beautiful passes? Massively.
I think the thing is with New York City FC last season, they had a mixed bag of it because they lost 7-0 to the Red Bulls, which was hugely embarrassing for them. I think the biggest winning margin in MLS history, or tied for at least. But they did also make the playoffs. So it was very much a cloud with a silver lining in that regard. They didn't do too well in the playoffs. They were pretty much battered by Toronto, the eventual runners-up. But overall, I think there was positives for Patrick to take. And as he moves in to year 3 of his time there, the hope is that the progression continues again, because they are fighting in that market for supporters, for market share with the New York Red Bulls. Now, I'm sure any NYCFC fans watching will point out the Red Bulls are officially based in Jersey, in Harrison. But again, it's still marketed as the New York Red Bulls, and that's where the difficulty stems.
Let's move on to number 4, and a new team in MLS, Atlanta. There's a playmaker there that you've got your eye on, and people need to watch out for him because he's got a lot of pressure on those shoulders of his.
Yeah, Miguel Almiron. He's a Paraguayan that's come from Lanús, and you're seeing consistently now MLS clubs buy from Argentina. Now there's a number of reasons for that, including the financial instability that is Argentinian football at the minute. He's reminded me a little bit of Di Maria. He's got a similar sort of build to him, quite skinny, quite slight, but will want to sit in that number 10 position and try and dictate things. And they've tried to put really quick, dynamic players around him. Vilabra, Josef Martinez from Torino, and then you've got the figurehead of Kenwyn Jones up top. So it's going to be a very interesting test. They've invested a lot of money in the likes of Almiron and those around him. So you've just got to hope that it works. And I'm sure Carlos Bocanegra expects it to.
Yeah, and Tata Martino, the manager there, so you would hope that he knows what a decent number 10. He's been around a few. But I guess the worry for you, am I right in saying, is that the league has become a lot more physical. I think it probably had. I coached out in America quite a while ago, and when the games that I saw, it did feel quite slow. It felt it kind of had that Spanish style to it. I might be completely wrong in saying that, but that's just what I saw. But now there's a lot more speed and a lot more physicality to it, and that could be something that could be difficult for him.
Yeah, it's the one concern you have with any sort of player of that ilk. It was the thing that was said about Sebastian Giovinco when he came. How will he handle big bustling defenders trying to get physical with him? And to be fair, he's embarrassed most of them.
Yeah.
So the hope is that Almiron does the same. I don't think he's quite in the same mold technically as Giovinco. That is a very high bar to match. But I think the thing with him is the early signs are positive. He's looked good in pre-season. They pretty much battered Chattanooga the other day. So I think he'll do okay, if only because I think he'll be given the kind of support and given the ball in kind of areas that are best for him.
And just quickly, what would be a successful season for them in their first one?
Well, you would argue the playoffs, even if it's just in that last spot. They're a very ambitious team. I spoke to Carlos Bocanegra last year, and he said our methodology is to think locally but act globally. And I think you look at Tata Martino's hire, and you would say that is true to form in that regard. So I think, that a sneak into the playoffs, maybe a decent run in the US Open Cup, which is sort of America's FA Cup, that would be great for them in terms of just setting them up as a winning team.
Okay, and then finally, we've got to talk about this man. We've mentioned him once or twice already. Giovinco, the best player in the league, a lot of people believe, breaking records last year. Is a player of his quality and the player that he's become, and the fact that they were able to get him, has that changed the strategy for MLS teams in terms of the players that they're bringing in now?
Massively so. I think, you talked about Pirlo there. You look at the fact Gerrard, Lampard, even Beckham, going back a little bit, came into this league. And I think that started to cultivate an image of this being a retirement league. I know when I speak to people who aren't familiar with it, that tends to be the stick that they beat the league with. The fact is that's not the case anymore. It's drastically changing. Giovinco, Albert Rusnak, Almiron, guys of that ilk are starting to be targeted because I think MLS wants a longevity of its stars. It doesn't want them to dip in and dip out like seasonal work. They want to be able to build this history, this narrative, and a little bit of a tapestry with players to say, okay, Giovinco stayed here for 4 or 5 years, Almiron 2-3 years, and that made it a better league because of it. And in the case of Almiron, I think they look at it and say, okay, well, if he does well here, there's a chance we can maybe even sell him on. So the motivations, I think, for MLS clubs have shifted as much as anything.
Okay, so last off, we've got to ask you this one. Who would you be putting your money on to win it all at the end of the season?
It's a great question. There's maybe 2 or 3. I can see LA Galaxy doing quite well. I've got a sneaking suspicion NYCFC might do something significant this season. I think Patrick's just refining the process every time. And I think you could see Portland have a little bit of a renaissance. They did not enjoy last season at all. They won the Cup 2 years ago and then had a terrible season. Didn't qualify for the playoffs, which is, I think there's only 2 teams that have ever done that in the history of MLS. Won the MLS Cup and then failed to qualify for the playoffs the next season.
Okay. Right, so I think that's it. Kristan, thank you so much, mate. Kristan is part of the Front Three podcast. Go and check that out. Follow him on Twitter, at Kristan Heneage. Am I right in saying that?
Correct.
Right, go and check him out. He writes incredible stuff, as you've just heard through his mouth. If you've enjoyed this video, then let us know. Let us know in the comments below. Let us know who's gonna win MLS this year and who are the key players that we may have missed out on this list that you think we should keep an eye out for this year. If you've enjoyed the video, give it a like. Most importantly, make sure you subscribe to Ball Street. We'll see you next time.